Hey, I'm Livia Creations, and I'm here to create. And today, we're upgrading this Xerneas model kit. Make sure to stay until the end to see the final results. So let's jump into it. First things first, I want to assess the figurine and take note of any gaps that I want to fill. Next, I'm locking in the pose in place with a healthy helping of crazy glue. For this step, I'm not being particularly careful, I just want the pose to stay in place. Sanding is super important if you want your epoxy to stick. But that's not the only reason to sand down your figurines, it will also help your primer stick. Speaking of epoxy, I'm using 2-part Apoxy Sculpt. Simply mix equal parts A and B and you can start sculpting on the figurine right away. There is no need for baking, which is perfect when you're working with a plastic figurine. Here I'm really smooshing down the clay into the joints, making sure that they are full before using a wetted finger to smooth down the transition. For those hard to reach places, I use a silicone tool and again a bit of water to smooth down my modifications. And then it's time for hours and hours of sanding with my trusty sanding blocks to make the figurine look seamless. These sanding blocks are originally for patching drywall, but I find them quite useful for crafting. And then it's time for Xerneas to find out if it can breathe underwater. No, seriously, rinsing down the figurine really helps getting rid of any heavier dust particles that were generated during the sanding process. Now that our figurine is as smooth as a newborn, we can go ahead and prime it. I'm using the Army Painter Gray Primer in thin coats as to not create large drips on my recently smoothed figurine. This step is always so satisfying to me, it's really when you can see if your modifications worked. While we let all of this dry thoroughly, we can move on to the base. I need to keep these 2 pegs intact because it is where Xerneas will sit. To make sure that these stay open and don't get clogged, I'm going to build an armature of sorts on top with aluminum foil. This step is crucial because I want to be able to peel the aluminum foil off of the original base afterwards. But why, you may ask? Well, because I'm going to be sculpting the base with polymer clay. Polymer clay needs to be baked, and, well, plastic and the oven don't really like each other. Of course, I'm taking really good care to extract these little pegs out of the clay. After taking the base to its proper roundness, I am pressing in a sticky stick to pre-indent the clay. But now our sticky friend needs some rocky friends to keep him company. For sculpting rocks, I always find it easier to start with an amorphous blob and cut away from it. With our rocky friends properly stacked and properly textured with a crumpled up piece of aluminum foil, I place them on the base. And then I immediately changed my mind and decided to uproot their entire family to move them an inch away from where they were. I add some dirty dirt and some stony stones to make the base appear lush and lived in. And then, the base is ready to be put in the oven to harden. While this cake is in the oven, let's prepare our frosting. This frosting is made up of white gesso, sawdust, and a variety of brown and yellow paints. Now you get to mix up this sloppy mess and get ready to spread its chunky goodness all over your cured base. During this step, I'm making sure not to cover up any of the stones because I want them to show up in the end. After letting it dry for what seemed like ages, I saw that it was an unfortunate color and decided I would repaint over it with a much more dirt brown. We can't forget about the rocks, they deserve love too. After everything is dry, it's time for the best step, dry brushing. And then it's time to paint our brown stick brown again. Of course, a dark grey wash over the rocks is mandatory. and then they receive their own spot of dry brushing with lighter and lighter shades. To fill in any gaps that my foliage might fail to cover, I am painting on a preliminary coat of green paint all over the places where I want to put my flocking next. This step is technically optional, but I really want my landscape to look lush and really lived in, so for me this step is very important. And now it's time for the final touches, and by extension one of my favorite part of doing landscapes. Adding on the foliage. In my opinion, this part really is the part that ties the whole thing together. The base is completed, and now for the fun part. We finally get to paint the figurine, starting with a generous coat of almost pure white paint. Even though white is the easiest color to dirty, I decided to start with it because it was the color that covered the most amount of surface on the model. I'll just have to be extra careful with where I put my hands from now on. Now, I'm blending in the shadows on the lower side of Xerneas' body. By dipping my paintbrush in water, I'm creating a soft gradient effect. Now it's time to paint on all the fur details. They are more concentrated where the fur is most obscured by shadows. I make sure to feather out all of those lines gradually as to not create any harsh, unwanted line in between the shadows and the light. When it comes to those kind of fur details, I'm gonna be honest, I don't really have a strict technique, and I just kind of go until it feels alright. Moving on from all the white, we can finally work on Xerneas' long blue neck. I know some of the most keen-eyed viewers among you noticed that I started wearing a blue glove on my hand. Simply, this is a latex glove, and I am wearing it to avoid staining the white part of Xerneas' body with the natural oils present on my hands. For this particular custom, I decided to make the light look like it came mostly from up top, which means that I need to do some shadows on anywhere that is opposite that direction, which includes under Xerneas' chin. Since the light comes from up top, it also includes adding some cute little highlights. We are finally within the last details, which also includes painting on the little gems on Xerneas' antlers. Pretty much all of the colors from the rainbow are present on Xerneas' antlers, starting with blue, going through purple, red, And finally, some yellowish green. For the gems, I really didn't want them to be too complicated or detailed, so I opted for a very graphic and cute style that would better match the rest of the figurine, in my opinion. After just a couple more details that were too small and hard to record, we can finally unite Xerneas to its base and see the final results. I want to take a moment to thank everybody that made it to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to drop a follow if you want more of this kind of content, and I'll see you in the next one. And as always, is it cute?